That's odd, I whispered to myself, staring at the unfamiliar credit card statement that had accidentally been delivered to our mailbox. The line item that caught my eye was a $54,000 charge at Johnson Luxury Motors, a purchase my husband Tom had never mentioned. What made it stranger was that just last week, he'd lectured me about being financially responsible when I'd asked about replacing my 10-year-old Honda with something more reliable. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I stood frozen in our kitchen, the granite countertop cold, beneath my fingertips as I processed what I was seeing. This statement was for a platinum card I didn't even know existed. The same day he'd bought whatever this $54,000 purchase was, there was also a charge for $3,200 at Tiffany's. Our anniversary had passed months ago, and my birthday wasn't until October, 6 months away. The garage door rumbled open, signaling Tom's arrival. I quickly slipped the statement into my purse, pasting on the supportive smile I'd perfected during our 15 years of marriage, the same smile I'd worn through countless corporate dinners where I'd played the role of the perfect executive's wife. Tom strode into the kitchen, his custom-tailored suit perfectly pressed despite his claimed exhausting day at the investment firm where he was senior partner. At 46, he still turned heads with his salt and pepper hair and confident bearing. I'd always been proud to be Mrs. Nicole Wilson, even as his career had increasingly dominated our lives. "Hey, Nick," he said, loosening his tie as he headed for the liquor cabinet. "Anything interesting happened today?" I watched him pour himself 2 fingers of the expensive bourbon he'd started drinking after his last promotion. "Just the usual," I replied, thinking of the statement burning a hole in my purse. "How was your day? Any major client meetings?" "Same old. Peterson account is giving us trouble." He wouldn't meet my eyes, a tell I'd noticed developing in recent months whenever I asked about his work. "Listen, I need to head back out in about an hour. Emergency strategy session with the team." Another late night. There had been many lately, along with weekend golf outings that somehow never resulted in any actual golf stories, and mysterious business trips that had doubled in frequency since his new assistant, Vanessa, had joined the firm. "On a Thursday? That's unusual," I commented, keeping my tone light. "Big client," he mumbled, already scrolling through his phone. "Very big client." As Tom disappeared upstairs to freshen up, I slipped the statement out again, studying it more carefully. The purchase had been made on a Tuesday when Tom had claimed to be in Chicago for a conference. I remembered because I'd asked him to FaceTime that evening, and he'd said the hotel Wi-Fi was terrible. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out my laptop and searched for Johnson Luxury Motors. It was a high-end dealership specializing in European sports cars, Porsches, Maseratis, and Lamborghinis. I'd never expressed interest in such vehicles, always practical about transportation, especially since we'd agreed children would be in our near future. Children that somehow never materialized as Tom's career goals repeatedly took priority. 30 minutes later, Tom emerged looking suspiciously refreshed for someone heading to an emergency work meeting. His cologne was different, stronger, more expensive than what he typically wore to the office. He'd also changed his tie. "Don't wait up," he said, dropping a perfunctory kiss on my cheek. "Probably going to be a late one." As the door closed, behind him, I made a decision. After 15 years of being the understanding, accommodating wife who never questioned his increasingly erratic schedule, I would finally trust my instincts. I grabbed my keys and followed him. Tom's silver Mercedes headed not toward downtown where his firm was located, but toward the affluent lakeside neighborhood. I maintained a careful distance, thankful for the defensive driving course I'd taken years ago after a minor fender bender. 20 minutes later, he pulled into the driveway of a sleek, modern home with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. I parked a block away, my heart pounding. What happened next felt like watching a scene from a movie about someone else's life. A stunning blonde woman, Vanessa, his 28-year-old assistant, emerged from the front door. She was wearing a red dress that hugged every curve of her body, curves that my own athletic frame had never possessed. But what made my stomach drop was what sat in the driveway beside Tom's Mercedes. A gleaming new black Porsche 911 with a vanity license plate that read, Vanessa. As Tom wrapped his arms around her, lifting her off her feet in a passionate embrace, I snapped a photo with my phone. Then another as they walked arm in arm toward the Porsche. I zoomed in as he handed her the keys, watched her delighted smile as she slid into the driver's seat of what was clearly a very expensive gift. The same husband who had repeatedly told me that my reliable but aging Honda was perfectly fine and financially sensible had bought his mistress a Porsche. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing through the past year, connecting dots I'd been to, trusting to see. The late nights, the changed passwords on his phone and laptop, the mysterious weekend trips, the way he'd been moving money between accounts, claiming it was for tax planning purposes. The new platinum credit card I hadn't known about until today. At home, I poured myself a glass of wine and began searching through our files. Tom had always handled our finances, his area of expertise after all, and I'd trusted him completely. Now I wondered if that had been my biggest mistake. By midnight, I'd discovered that our joint savings had been depleted by nearly 60% over the past 8 months. Our retirement accounts showed unusual transfer activities. There was a mortgage on a lakefront property I'd never heard of, presumably the modern house I'd seen earlier. And our own home's equity line had been maxed out, though I couldn't trace where that money had gone. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Strategy session running late, crashing at Mark's place downtown. Mark was his college friend who had a condo in the city. I wondered how many strategy sessions had actually been nights spent with Vanessa in their lakefront love nest. I needed help and perspective. I called my best friend Lisa, despite the late hour. Nicole, everything okay? She answered, her voice thick with sleep. No, I admitted, my voice breaking for the first time. Nothing is okay. Tom's having an affair with his assistant. He bought her a Porsche. Our savings are disappearing. I don't know what to do. There was a pause. Then Lisa spoke carefully. Honey, I need to tell you something. Jack and I saw Tom and a young blonde woman at Costello's last month. They were very affectionate. I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to. You should have told me, I interrupted, hurt that my friend had kept this from me. You're right, Lisa sighed. I should have. But you've always been so sure about Tom, so trusting. I thought maybe it was a client or... I don't know. I'm sorry. After we hung up, I sat in the dark kitchen thinking about what to do next. The old Nicole would have confronted Tom immediately, tears streaming down her face, demanding explanations while giving him time to craft plausible lies. The old Nicole would have maybe even believed those lies, desperate to preserve the life she'd invested 15 years in building. But something had shifted in me tonight. The shock was giving way to a cold, clear anger. Tom hadn't just betrayed our marriage. He was systematically dismantling our financial future while maintaining the fiction that we couldn't afford to replace my car. He was using our resources to fund a lavish lifestyle with his mistress while lecturing me about fiscal responsibility. I needed to be strategic. I needed expertise. Most of all, I needed to protect myself. Morning found me in the office of Diane Rodriguez, a divorce attorney Lisa had recommended. I'd taken the day off work from my job as a high school guidance counselor, claiming a migraine. It wasn't far from the truth. My head was pounding from lack of sleep and the weight of decisions ahead. Financial infidelity often accompanies physical infidelity, Diane explained after I'd outlined my discoveries. Based on what you've told me, Tom has been systematically hiding assets and diverting funds. That's not just morally wrong, it's legally actionable. What should I do? I asked, feeling both overwhelmed and strangely empowered by finally taking action. First, we document everything. We need copies of all financial records before he realizes you're onto him. Second, we get a forensic accountant involved immediately. The transfers and depleted accounts are red flags that he's been planning this for some time. Diane's confidence was reassuring. For the first time since discovering the credit card statement, I felt like I might survive this betrayal. Should I confront him? I asked. Not yet, Diane advised. We need to understand the full picture first. If he knows you're investigating, he might accelerate whatever he's planning or hide assets more effectively. For now, maintain normalcy while we build our case. Over the next 3 weeks, I lived a double life. On the surface, I was still Nicole Wilson, devoted wife and high school guidance counselor, maintaining our home and accepting Tom's increasingly thin excuses for his absences. But in private, I was building a case with Diane and Michael Chen, the forensic accountant she'd recommended. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The picture that emerged was worse than I'd initially feared. Tom had been systematically diverting funds for nearly 2 years. The lakefront property was just the beginning. There was a LLC in Vanessa's name that had received hundreds of thousands of dollars from our investments. Luxury purchases, beyond just the Porsche, included high-end watches, designer clothing, and first-class international trips during times when Tom had claimed to be at industry conferences. He's been careful, Michael explained, spreading documents across Diane's conference table. But not careful enough. The money trail is clear once you know where to look. He's been planning to leave you financially strapped while setting up his new life with Vanessa. The final confirmation came from an unexpected source. Tom's administrative assistant at the firm, Janet, had been with him for 12 years, longer than he'd been with Vanessa. I'd always sent Janet gifts for Administrative Professionals Day and remembered her children's names. When I stopped by the office unannounced with the excuse of surprising Tom for lunch, Janet's expression told me everything. He's out with a client, she said, not meeting my eyes. Vanessa too? I asked quietly. Janet's gaze snapped to mine, surprise and guilt warring on her face. After a moment, she closed the office door and turned to me. Nicole, I've wanted to say something for months, but he's my boss. I need this job. My kids? I understand, I assured her. But I need to know what's happening, please. Over the next hour, Janet revealed the extent of the affair. It had begun shortly after Vanessa joined the firm. Tom had been increasingly open about their relationship at the office, even as he maintained the fiction of our happy marriage in our social circles. Most devastatingly, Janet confirmed that Tom and Vanessa were planning to move to the firm's London office within 2 months, something Tom had never mentioned to me. He's been transferring clients to his portfolio there, Janet explained. The partners already approved it. I'm sorry, Nicole. I thought you knew, that maybe you were going too. I thanked Janet for her honesty, assuring her that I wouldn't reveal her as my source. As I left the building, I called Diane. He's planning to leave the country, I said without preamble. 2 months. London office transfer. What does this mean for the divorce? It complicates things, Diane admitted. International divorces can be messy, but it also means we need to accelerate our timeline. Come to my office immediately. The plan we devised was bold. Rather than waiting for Tom to make his move, we would act first, filing for divorce and simultaneously petitioning for an emergency freeze on all our assets based on the evidence of financial misconduct. The timing would be crucial. We needed to catch Tom off guard before he could hide more assets or finalize his London plans. What about the Porsche? I asked. And the lakefront property? Diane smiled for the first time that day. The Porsche is particularly interesting. Our forensic accountant discovered that Tom used joint funds for the down payment and registered the vehicle in both his and Vanessa's names, likely to help her establish credit. That makes it a marital asset improperly gifted to a third party. As for the lakefront property, it was purchased using equity from your primary residence. Again, marital assets. So what does that mean? It means, Diane said, her smile widening, that both are subject to recovery as part of the divorce settlement. In fact, given the documented pattern of financial deception, we have grounds to request the court to award you a greater portion of marital assets as compensation. The next 2 weeks were a flurry of preparations. I gathered additional documentation, opened new bank accounts in my name only, and secured a small apartment near the high school where I worked. Meanwhile, Tom grew increasingly distant, frequently working late and spending entire weekends away on client retreats. The confrontation came sooner than planned. I returned home early from a counseling conference to find Tom in our home office, hurriedly packing financial documents into his briefcase. He froze when he saw me, guilt flashing across his face before his expression settled into practiced neutrality. "Nicole, I thought you were at that conference until tomorrow." "Clearly," I replied, noticing how he shifted to block my view of the documents. "What are you doing, Tom?" "Just catching up on some work. The Peterson account." "Stop," I interrupted, surprising both of us with my calm tone. "No more lies. I know about Vanessa. I know about the Porsche. I know about the lakefront house. I know about London." His face went through a rapid series of emotions: shock, anger, calculation, and finally, a strange relief. "How long have you known?" he asked, dropping all pretense. "Long enough to understand exactly what you've been doing with our money. Long enough to hire a divorce attorney and a forensic accountant. Long enough to file papers requesting an emergency freeze on all our assets, which was granted yesterday." That got his attention. "You froze our assets? You can't do that. I have commitments, arrangements." "With Vanessa? For London? Those plans might need to be adjusted," I said, feeling a surge of satisfaction at his obvious panic. The judge was particularly interested in the pattern of financial deception. The hearing for the temporary orders is scheduled for Monday. Tom's face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous. I've worked my ass off for 15 years building my career, building our wealth, and you think you can just—" "Our wealth," I emphasized. "Built during our marriage, while I supported your career, maintained our home, and put my own ambitions on hold because you always said we were a team. Was that team spirit when you bought your girlfriend a Porsche while telling me we couldn't afford to replace my Honda?" He had the grace to look momentarily ashamed before his expression hardened. "Vanessa appreciates what I've accomplished. She supports my vision for the future." "I'm sure the Porsche helped with that appreciation," I replied dryly. "You should know that your vision for the future is going to look quite different than you planned. I'll see you in court on Monday." As I turned to leave, Tom called after me, his voice taking on the persuasive tone he used with difficult clients. "Nicole, be reasonable. We can work this out privately. No need for lawyers and courts. I'll make sure you're taken care of." "Like you've been taking care of me for the past 2 years?" I asked, turning back to face him. "Planning your exit while depleting our savings? Buying luxury gifts for your girlfriend while lecturing me about fiscal responsibility? That kind of taking care of?" His face darkened. "You'll regret this." "Approach. I know people. I have resources." "So do I interrupted. "And mine have subpoena power." The weekend was tense. Tom alternated between attempts to intimidate me with financial threats and offers of generous settlements if I would agree to handle things quietly. I maintained my calm, referring all his communications to Diane while I packed the essentials I would take to my new apartment. Monday's hearing was everything Diane had promised. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, reviewed our evidence of Tom's financial misconduct with increasing displeasure. When Tom's hastily hired attorney attempted to characterize the transfers as routine investment activities, she cut him off. "Counselor, there is nothing routine about establishing secret accounts and properties with marital funds while actively misleading a spouse about financial status. The court finds sufficient evidence to maintain the freeze on all assets pending full financial discovery." But the true moment of justice came 3 weeks later. Through Janet, I learned that Tom was planning a weekend getaway with Vanessa to de-stress from the divorce proceedings. They would be staying at an exclusive mountain resort 3 hours from the city, the same resort where Tom and I had celebrated our 10th anniversary. The timing aligned perfectly with what Diane and I had set in motion. The court had ordered the Porsche recovered as an improperly gifted marital asset, and the repo team had been trying to locate it for days. Thanks to Janet's information, we knew exactly where it would be. I made my own reservation at the resort for the same weekend. When I pulled into the parking lot in my aging Honda, I spotted the black Porsche immediately, parked prominently near the entrance. I checked in and then made a call to the recovery company. 2 hours later, I sat on my balcony overlooking the resort's grand entrance, sipping champagne as I watched the scene unfold. The repo team was professional and efficient, loading the Porsche onto their flatbed truck with practiced ease. I had specifically requested they wait until dinner time, when I knew Tom and Vanessa would likely be at the resort's 5-star restaurant. Sure enough, just as they secured the final restraint, Tom and Vanessa emerged from the lobby. Tom's face contorted with rage as he realized what was happening. He rushed toward the truck, Vanessa tottering behind him in impractical heels. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I heard him shout. "That's my car." The recovery agent calmly presented the court order. "Actually, sir, according to this, it's not. This vehicle has been determined to be a marital asset improperly gifted to a third party. We're authorized to recover it immediately." What followed was a spectacular meltdown. Tom alternated between threatening legal action, offering bribes, and eventually begging. Vanessa stood by, her beautiful face crumpling as the symbol of Tom's devotion and her status was driven away. I waited until the truck had departed before making my entrance. Timed perfectly, I pulled up to the valet stand in what had, until recently, been Tom's prized Mercedes, now legally transferred to me as part of the temporary property division. The look on Tom's face when he saw me emerge from his car was worth every moment of pain he had caused me. "Nice evening for a drive, isn't it?" I asked pleasantly as I handed the keys to the valet. "Although I hear some people are having transportation issues." Tom's face flushed dark red. "You did this? You vindictive." "Careful, Tom," I interrupted. "Resort security is right over there, and scenes like the one you just made tend to attract attention. Besides, I'm just following the court's orders. You remember the court? The legal system you thought you could outsmart while hiding assets from your wife of 15 years? Vanessa looked between us, confusion and anger warring on her perfect features. "Tom, what's happening? Where are they taking my car?" "It was never your car," I told her gently. "It was purchased with marital funds, money that belonged to both Tom and me. Just like the lakefront house you've been living in, which the court has also ordered returned to the marital estate." Her eyes widened. "The house? But we just finished decorating the nursery." She clamped her mouth shut, but it was too late. I felt a moment of genuine pain pierce through my armor of righteous anger. A nursery. That explained the sudden urgency of Tom's plans. Vanessa was pregnant with the child Tom had always told me we should wait for the right time to have. I maintained my composure with effort. "I suggest you both find alternative accommodations. The lakefront property will be changing hands by the end of the week." As I walked away, I heard Vanessa's angry questions and Tom's fumbling responses. Their perfect future was unraveling rapidly, and while I took no pleasure in her pain, she wasn't the one who had made vows to me. I felt a profound sense of justice being served. 6 months later, my life had transformed completely. The divorce was finalized with terms far more favorable than even Diane had initially hoped for. Tom's attempts to hide assets had so angered the judge that she awarded me 70% of all recovered marital property, including the lakefront house, which I promptly sold for a substantial profit. Tom's career had suffered as well. His firm's partners, concerned about the financial improprieties revealed during the divorce proceedings, had rescinded his London transfer. Last I heard through mutual friends, he was working at a much smaller firm, his reputation tarnished. Vanessa had given birth to a baby boy and was pursuing child support, though Tom's reduced circumstances meant she wasn't living the luxury lifestyle she had anticipated. As for me, I had discovered unexpected strength in adversity. The settlement provided financial security, allowing me to reduce my counseling hours and return to school for the master's degree I had deferred when Tom's career took precedence. I had also started a support group for women facing similar situations, turning my painful experience into a resource for others. Lisa remained my steadfast friend, admitting she had feared Tom's reaction if she had revealed what she knew earlier. I had forgiven her, understanding that the dynamics of betrayal affected everyone in its orbit, not just the primary parties. My most symbolic act of closure came when I finally replaced my aging Honda, not with a flashy status symbol, but with a practical, reliable vehicle that I had researched thoroughly and purchased with my own funds, registering it in my name, alone. Every time I drove it, I was reminded of how far I had come from being the woman whose husband controlled which car she drove while buying his mistress a Porsche. The experience had taught me painful but valuable lessons. Trust should be accompanied by verification. Financial independence is as important as emotional independence, and sometimes, justice doesn't come from changing others, but from changing your own response to betrayal. Most importantly, I had learned that while I couldn't control Tom's choices, I could control my own reaction to them. Instead of remaining a victim, I had become the architect of my own justice, and ultimately, my own happiness. Another late night. There had been many lately, along with weekend golf outings that somehow never resulted in any actual golf stories, and mysterious business trips that had doubled in frequency since his new assistant, Vanessa, had joined the firm. On a Thursday? That's unusual, I commented, keeping my tone light. Big client? He mumbled, already scrolling through his phone. Very big client. As Tom disappeared upstairs to freshen up, I slipped the statement out again, studying it more carefully. The purchase had been made on a Tuesday when Tom had claimed to be in Chicago for a conference. I remembered because I'd asked him to FaceTime that evening, and he'd said the hotel Wi-Fi was terrible. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out my laptop and searched for Johnson Luxury Motors. It was a high-end dealership specializing in European sports cars, Porsches, Maseratis, and Lamborghinis. I'd never expressed interest in such vehicles, always practical about transportation, especially since we'd agreed children would be in our near future. Children that somehow never materialized as Tom's career goals repeatedly took priority. 30 minutes later, Tom emerged looking suspiciously, refreshed for someone heading to an emergency work meeting. His cologne was different, stronger, more expensive than what he typically wore to the office. He'd also changed his tie. "Don't wait up," he said, dropping a perfunctory kiss on my cheek. Probably going to be a late one. As the door closed, behind him, I made a decision. After 15 years of being the understanding, accommodating wife who never questioned his increasingly erratic schedule, I would finally trust my instincts. I grabbed my keys and followed him. Tom's silver Mercedes headed not toward downtown where his firm was located, but toward the affluent lakeside neighborhood. I maintained a careful distance, thankful for the defensive driving course I'd taken, years ago after a minor fender bender. 20 minutes later, he pulled into the driveway of a sleek, modern home with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. I parked a block away, my heart pounding. What happened next felt like watching a scene from a movie about someone else's life. A stunning blonde woman, Vanessa, his 28-year-old assistant, emerged from the front door. She was wearing a red dress that hugged every curve of her body, curves that my own athletic frame had never possessed. But what made my stomach drop was what sat in the driveway beside Tom's Mercedes, a gleaming new black Porsche 911 with a vanity license plate that read Van Thessa. As Tom wrapped his arms around her, lifting her off her feet in a passionate embrace, I snapped a photo with my phone. Then another as they walked arm in arm toward the Porsche. I zoomed in as he handed her the keys, watched her delighted smile as she slid into the driver's seat of what was clearly a very expensive gift. The same husband who had repeatedly told me that my reliable but aging Honda was perfectly fine and financially sensible had bought his mistress a Porsche. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing through the past year, connecting dots I'd been too trusting to see. The late nights, the changed passwords on his phone and laptop, the mysterious weekend trips, the way he'd been moving money between accounts, claiming it was for tax planning purposes. The new platinum credit card I hadn't known about until today. At home, I poured myself a glass of wine and began searching through our files. Tom had always handled our finances, his area of expertise after all, and I'd trusted him completely. Now I wondered if that had been my biggest mistake. By midnight, I'd discovered that our joint savings had been depleted by nearly 60% over the past 8 months. Our retirement accounts showed unusual transfer activities. There was a mortgage on a lakefront property I'd never heard of, presumably the modern house I'd seen earlier. And our own home's equity line had been maxed out, though I couldn't trace where that money had gone. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Strategy session running late, crashing at Mark's place downtown. Mark was his college friend who had a condo in the city. I wondered how many strategy sessions had actually been nights spent with Vanessa in their lakefront love nest. I needed help and perspective. I called my best friend Lisa, despite the late hour. "Nicole, everything okay?" she answered, her voice thick with sleep. "No," I admitted, my voice breaking for the first time. "Nothing is okay. Tom's having an affair with his assistant. He bought her a Porsche. Our savings are disappearing. I don't know what to do." There was a pause. Then Lisa spoke carefully. "Honey, I need to tell you something. Jack and I saw Tom and a young blonde woman at Costello's last month. They were very affectionate. I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to." "You should have told me," I interrupted, hurt that my friend had kept this from me. "You're right," Lisa sighed. "I should have, but you've always been so sure about Tom, so trusting. I thought maybe it was a client or... I don't know. I'm sorry." After we hung up, I sat in the dark kitchen thinking about what to do next. The old Nicole would have confronted Tom immediately, tears streaming down her face, demanding explanations, while giving him time to craft plausible lies. The old Nicole would have maybe even believed those lies, desperate to preserve the life she'd invested 15 years in building. But something had shifted in me tonight. The shock was giving way to a cold, clear anger. Tom hadn't just betrayed our marriage. He was systematically dismantling our financial future while maintaining the fiction that we couldn't afford to replace my car. He was using our resources to fund a lavish lifestyle with his mistress while lecturing me about fiscal responsibility. I needed to be strategic. I needed expertise. Most of all, I needed to protect myself. Morning found me in the office of Diane Rodriguez, a divorce attorney Lisa had recommended. I'd taken the day off work from my job as a high school guidance counselor, claiming a migraine. It wasn't far from the truth. My head was pounding from lack of sleep and the weight of decisions ahead. Financial infidelity often accompanies physical infidelity, Diane explained after I'd outlined my discoveries. Based on what you've told me, Tom has been systematically hiding assets and diverting funds. That's not just morally wrong. It's legally actionable. What should I do? I asked, feeling both overwhelmed and strangely empowered by finally taking action. First, we document everything. We need copies of all financial records before he realizes you're onto him. Second, we get a forensic accountant involved immediately. The transfers and depleted accounts are red flags that he's been planning this for some time. Diane's confidence was reassuring. For the first time since discovering the credit card statement, I felt like I might survive this betrayal. Should I confront him? I asked. Not yet, Diane advised. We need to understand the full picture first. If he knows you're investigating, he might accelerate whatever he's planning or hide assets more effectively. For now, maintain normalcy while we build our case. Over the next 3 weeks, I lived a double life. On the surface, I was still Nicole Wilson, devoted wife and high school guidance counselor, maintaining our home and accepting Tom's increasingly thin excuses for his absences. But in private, I was building a case with Diane and Michael Chen, the forensic accountant she'd recommended. The picture that emerged was worse than I'd initially feared. Tom had been systematically diverting funds for nearly 2 years. The lakefront property was just the beginning. There was a LLC in Vanessa's name that had received hundreds of thousands of dollars from our investments. Luxury purchases, beyond just the Porsche, included high-end watches, designer clothing, and first-class international trips during times when Tom had claimed to be at industry conferences. He's been careful, Michael explained, spreading documents across Diane's conference table. But not careful enough. The money trail is clear once you know where to look. He's been planning to leave you financially strapped while setting up his new life with Vanessa. The final confirmation came from an unexpected source. Tom's administrative assistant at the firm, Janet, had been with him for 12 years, longer than he'd been with Vanessa. I'd always sent Janet gifts for Administrative Professionals Day and remembered her children's names. When I stopped by the office unannounced with the excuse of surprising Tom for lunch, Janet's expression told me, "Everything. He's out with a client," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Vanessa too?" I asked quietly. Janet's gaze snapped to mine, surprise and guilt warring on her face. After a moment, she closed the office door and turned to me. "Nicole, I've wanted to say something for months, but he's my boss. I need this job. My kids—" "I understand," I assured her. "But I need to know what's happening. Please." Over the next hour, Janet revealed the extent of the affair. It had begun shortly after Vanessa joined the firm. Tom had been increasingly open about their relationship at the office, even as he maintained the fiction of our happy marriage in our social circles. Most devastatingly, Janet confirmed that Tom and Vanessa were planning to move to the firm's London office within 2 months, something Tom had never mentioned to me. "He's been transferring clients to his portfolio there," Janet explained. "The partners already approved it. I'm sorry, Nicole. I thought you knew that maybe you were going too." I thanked Janet for her honesty, assuring her that I wouldn't reveal her as my source. As I left the building, I called Diane. "He's planning to leave the country," I said without preamble. 2 months, London office transfer. What does this mean for the divorce? "It complicates things," Diane admitted. "International divorces can be messy, but it also means we need to accelerate our timeline. Come to my office immediately." The plan we devised was bold. Rather than waiting for Tom to make his move, we would act first, filing for divorce and simultaneously petitioning for an emergency freeze on all our assets based on the evidence of financial misconduct. The timing would be crucial. We needed to catch Tom off guard before he could hide more assets or finalize his London plans. "What about the Porsche?" I asked. "And the lakefront property?" Diane smiled for the first time that day. The Porsche is particularly interesting. Our forensic accountant discovered that Tom used joint funds for the down payment and registered the vehicle in both his and Vanessa's names, likely to help her establish credit. That makes it a marital asset improperly gifted to a third party. As for the lakefront property, it was purchased using equity from your primary residence. Again, marital assets. So what does that mean? It means, Diane said, her smile widening, that both are subject to recovery as part of the divorce settlement. In fact, given the documented pattern of financial deception, we have grounds to request the court to award you a greater portion of marital assets as compensation. The next 2 weeks were a flurry of preparations. I gathered additional documentation, opened new bank accounts in my name only, and secured a small apartment near the high school where I worked. Meanwhile, Tom grew increasingly distant, frequently working late and spending entire weekends away on client retreats. I also began discreetly moving personal items of value, jewelry my grandmother had left me, photo albums from before I met Tom, a small collection of first edition books I'd inherited from my father. Nothing that would alert Tom, but things I couldn't bear to lose if things got ugly, and I was increasingly certain they would. One evening, while Tom was supposedly at a client dinner, I discovered a folder of emails he'd accidentally left open on his laptop. Normally, I would have respected his privacy, but those days were long past. The emails were between Tom and a realtor in London, discussing properties in Kensington, one of the city's most exclusive areas. The most recent exchange included floor plans for a penthouse with a nursery with southern exposure. A nursery. The word hit me like a physical blow. All those years of Tom saying, "Not yet," to starting our family. All those conversations about waiting for the right time. While he was apparently planning a family with someone else. I photographed the emails, my hands shaking with a mixture of grief and rage, and forwarded them to Diane. Her response was immediate. "This accelerates everything. Come in first thing tomorrow." The next morning, as I prepared to leave for Diane's office, Tom announced he was taking a 4-day golf trip with clients. He seemed distracted, barely making eye contact as he packed his suitcase. "Have a good time," I said, watching him select ties I knew he'd never wear on a golf. "Course. Will you be staying at the usual resort?" "Probably," he replied vaguely. "Might move around a bit. Reception can be spotty, so don't worry if you can't reach me." How many lies had I accepted over the years? How many times had I chosen to believe him despite the evidence in front of me? I smiled and kissed his cheek, playing my part one last time. "Drive safely," I called as he headed out the door, suitcase in hand. Little did he know that while he was gone, his carefully constructed life would begin to unravel. At Diane's office, the team had expanded to include a private investigator named Roy, a former police detective with a specialty in financial crimes. He had already begun surveillance of the lakefront property and had photographed Tom and Vanessa, arriving there the previous evening, clearly contradicting Tom's golf trip story. "We've also been monitoring flight bookings," Roy explained, showing me printouts. "There are 2 first-class tickets to London in their names departing in 3 weeks one way." 3 weeks? I gasped. But he told his firm 2 months. "People lie," Roy said with a shrug, "especially when they're planning to leave their wives and take half the firm's client base with them." While I processed this information, Michael arrived with more financial documentation. "We've found something significant," he said, spreading papers across the table. "Tom's been diverting client funds into personal accounts. It's not just your money he's been stealing." Diane's expression grew serious. "That's criminal misconduct. It goes beyond divorce proceedings and into potential fraud charges." "What does that mean for our case?" I asked. "It gives us leverage," Diane explained. But it also means we need to proceed carefully. We'll file the divorce petition today as planned, but we'll also prepare documentation for the State Bar Association and potentially the District Attorney's Office. By the end of the day, my divorce petition had been filed, along with the emergency motion to freeze assets. The court had expedited the hearing due to the evidence of imminent asset removal from the jurisdiction. The hearing was scheduled for 2 days later, still within Tom's supposed golf trip. I returned home physically and emotionally exhausted, but strangely calm. The path ahead was clear now. The only question was how Tom would react when he discovered what I'd done. I didn't have to wait long to find out. At 11:30 that night, my phone exploded with calls and texts from Tom. I ignored them, following Diane's advice to avoid direct communication. Finally, he left a voicemail that I played on speaker while Diane listened on the phone. "Nicole, what the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "The bank just called me. All our accounts are frozen. My cards are being declined. This is my money we're talking about. My career that earned it. You need to fix this immediately or you'll regret it." "Save that," Diane advised. Threats made during divorce proceedings are taken seriously by the court. And notice how he's already claiming it's solely his money, despite 15 years of marriage? That attitude will not serve him well before a judge. The next morning, I awoke to find Tom standing in our bedroom doorway, still in the clothes he'd been wearing when he left. His normally immaculate appearance was disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed with either exhaustion or anger. Possibly both. "We need to talk," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. I sat up, pulling the covers around me. "I have nothing to say to you except through my attorney. Her contact information is on the divorce petition you were served with." His laugh was harsh. "Is that what this is about? You're upset about Vanessa? Marriages hit rough patches, Nicole. Mature people work through them instead of running to lawyers and freezing accounts." "Is that what you call emptying our savings? Setting up a love nest with your assistant? Planning to move to London without telling me? A rough patch?" I was surprised at how steady my voice remained. For a moment, he looked startled that I knew about London. Then his expression hardened. "You've been spying on me." "No, Tom. I've been protecting myself from a husband who's been systematically betraying me, both emotionally and financially, for years." He stepped further into the room, and I instinctively drew back. Something in my reaction seemed to anger him further. "Don't play the victim, Nicole. You've been living comfortably on my income for 15 years. Did you think I wouldn't eventually get tired of supporting a wife who contributes nothing but a mediocre salary from a job any college graduate could do?" The cruelty was breathtaking, but not entirely surprising. Tom had always been dismissive of my career in education, viewing it as less valuable than his work in finance. Still, hearing him express his contempt so openly hurt in ways I hadn't anticipated. "You should leave," I said quietly. "The court has ordered that both of us maintain residence in our respective homes until the hearing. For me, that's here. I imagine yours is the lakefront property with Vanessa." His face flushed. "That property is mine. You have no right." Actually, according to the documentation we've submitted to the court, that property was purchased with marital funds and equity from this house, which makes it subject to asset division. The same applies to the Porsche you bought her. The mention of the Porsche visibly rattled him. "You've been following me." "I didn't need to follow you, Tom. The credit card statement came to the house. The one for the platinum card I didn't. No existed. The same statement that showed a $54,000 charge at a luxury car dealership and a $3,200 purchase at Tiffany's. Not difficult to connect the dots." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd seen many times during our marriage. "Look, I can explain all of this. The property is an investment. The car was a business expense. Vanessa needs reliable transportation for client meetings. The Tiffany purchase. It was your birthday gift. I was saving it. My birthday was 6 months away, and Tom knew I preferred simple jewelry to anything flashy. The lies were so transparent it was almost insulting that he thought I'd believe them. "Save your explanations for the court," I said, reaching for my phone. "Now, I'm asking you again to leave. If you don't, I'll call the police and report a violation of the temporary restraining order included in the emergency petition." He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. "You've changed." "Yes," I agreed. "I have." After a tense moment, he turned and left. I heard him rummaging around in his office, presumably collecting documents, before the front door slammed. Through the bedroom window, I watched him get into his Mercedes and drive away, his tires squealing slightly on the pavement. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding and called Diane to report the encounter. "It went as expected," she said after I'd relayed the conversation. "He's realizing he's lost control of the narrative and the process. That's good, for us, but it also means he might escalate. Are you sure you want to stay in the house? We could arrange for a hotel." "No," I said firmly. "I'm not leaving my home. This is where I belong." After hanging up, I walked through the house that had been mine, ours, for the past decade. The modern open floor plan that had once felt so welcoming now seemed exposed, vulnerable. I checked all the doors and windows, activating the security system Tom had insisted on installing when we'd moved to this upscale neighborhood. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was now using it for protection against him. The next morning brought a flurry of legal maneuvers from Tom's hastily acquired attorney, a well-known shark, who specialized in representing high-net-worth clients in contentious divorces. They filed emergency motions to unfreeze specific accounts, claiming business necessity, and requested a postponement of the initial hearing. Diane had anticipated these moves. "Standard delaying tactics," she explained during our morning call. "They're hoping to buy time to hide more assets or move money offshore. But the judge assigned to our case is familiar with these strategies. I'm confident our emergency freeze will hold." She was right. By mid-afternoon, the judge had denied Tom's motions and confirmed our hearing for the following day. The court also appointed a special master, an independent financial expert, to review all accounts and transactions during the pendency of the divorce. "This is a significant win," Diane explained. "The special master has broad authority to trace assets and recommend sanctions for any financial misconduct discovered." That evening, as I prepared for the hearing, I received an unexpected visitor. The doorbell rang around 7 p.m., and through the security camera, I saw Vanessa standing on my porch. She wore an expensive-looking cashmere coat, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the light rain falling. Her face was composed, but her hands fidgeted with her designer handbag. Following Diane's standing advice to avoid unwitnessed conversations with interested parties, I called her before answering the door. "She's probably recording," Diane warned. "Whatever you do, don't lose your temper or make any statements about the case. In fact, it's best not to engage at all." I opened the door with my phone visibly recording in my hand. "Vanessa, this is unexpected." Her practiced smile faltered slightly at the sight of my phone. "Nicole, I was hoping we could talk, woman to woman." "I don't think that's appropriate, given the ongoing legal proceedings," I replied, maintaining a neutral tone. "Any communication should go through our respective attorneys." She stepped forward, lowering her voice. "This doesn't have to be so adversarial. Tom is willing to be generous if you'll agree to a quick, quiet settlement. The longer this drags out, the less there will be for everyone." The implicit threat was clear. Fight, and Tom would spend money on legal fees rather than let me have it. It was exactly the kind of thinking I would have expected from him. As I said, any settlement discussions should go through our attorneys. "Goodbye, Vanessa." As I moved to close the door, she placed her hand on it. "Don't you care that you're destroying his career? Everything he's worked for?" The audacity was breathtaking. Tom made his choices, I said evenly. As did you. The consequences of those choices aren't my responsibility. Her composed facade cracked slightly. You're just bitter because he chose me. Because I'm giving him what you couldn't. A family. A partner who supports his ambitions instead of holding him back with a meaningless career and domestic expectations. The words were calculated to wound, and I felt a flash of pain before recognizing them for what they were. Tom's words, not hers. I'd heard similar sentiments from him over the years, usually framed more diplomatically, but carrying the same dismissive attitude toward my career and desires. I'm not having this conversation, I said firmly. Please leave before I call the police. She stepped back, smoothing her coat with an attempt at dignity. This won't end well for you, Nicole. Tom knows people. Important people. You're just a high school counselor from a middle-class family. You're out of your depth. I closed the door without responding, my hands shaking slightly as I engaged the lock. Her visit confirmed what Diane had suspected. Tom was growing desperate as his carefully constructed plans unraveled. The threat about knowing people echoed his own warnings and revealed their shared view of the world as a place where connections and power should prevail over justice. It was precisely this worldview that had allowed Tom to believe he could discard 15 years of marriage while keeping most of his assets and facing no consequences. The hearing tomorrow would be the first step in showing him how wrong he was. I called Diane immediately to report the encounter. Save that recording, she advised. Approaching you directly after being instructed not to contact you is a violation of the temporary orders. We can use this. The next morning, I dressed carefully for court in a conservative navy suit that projected professionalism without ostentation. Tom would undoubtedly appear in one of his custom-tailored designer suits, playing the role of the successful financier. I didn't need to compete on that level. The documentation we'd prepared would speak for itself. Diane met me at the courthouse, her confidence reassuring as we reviewed our strategy one final time. Remember, she said, no matter what accusations or insinuations his attorney makes, maintain your composure. The financial evidence is on our side. Don't let them provoke an emotional reaction that might distract from that. Tom and his attorney arrived just minutes before the scheduled hearing, a power move designed to minimize pre-court interaction. Vanessa wasn't with him, but I noticed Janet, his administrative assistant, entering the courtroom and sitting in the back row. Her presence surprised me until I realized Diane had likely subpoenaed her as a witness regarding the London transfer plans. As the judge entered and the hearing began, I focused on maintaining the calm demeanor Diane had advised. Tom's attorney presented first, portraying his client as a hard-working financial professional whose wife had vindictively frozen assets vital to his business operations, potentially harming clients in the process. Furthermore, Your Honor, the attorney continued, Mrs. Wilson has engaged in a campaign of harassment against my client and his colleague, including stalking and making threats. We ask that the court dissolve the emergency asset freeze and issue a mutual restraining order prohibiting such behavior. The accusation of harassment was so unexpected that I nearly gasped aloud. Diane squeezed my arm gently, a reminder to maintain composure before rising to respond. Your Honor, these accusations are not only false, but represent a transparent attempt to distract from the documented financial misconduct that necessitated the emergency freeze in the first place. She began. We have evidence that Mr. Wilson has been systematically diverting marital assets for at least 2 years, including purchasing real estate and luxury vehicles for a woman with whom he is having an extramarital relationship. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, peered over her reading glasses. I'm not interested in the personal aspects of this dissolution except as they pertain to financial impropriety. Does the petitioner have documentation of these diversions? Extensive documentation, Your Honor, Diane replied, approaching the bench with the binder we had prepared, including bank records showing transfers to accounts Mr. Wilson concealed from his wife, property records for a lakefront home purchased using equity from the marital residence, and evidence of a luxury vehicle purchased using marital funds but registered to his paramour. As the judge reviewed the documents, I glanced at Tom. His expression remained impassive, but a muscle twitched in his jaw, a tell I recognized from our marriage. He was furious. His attorney attempted to counter, claiming the assets in question were business investments made with funds that were separate property due to Tom's exceptional contribution to their acquisition. The argument was weak, especially given the evidence of how the purchases had been structured and concealed. After reviewing the documentation and hearing arguments from both sides, the judge rendered her decision. The court finds sufficient evidence of potential dissipation of marital assets to maintain the emergency freeze pending a full accounting. The special master will have 30 days to complete a forensic examination of all accounts and provide a report to the court. She then addressed Tom directly. Mr. Wilson, the court takes a very dim view of attempts to conceal or divert marital assets prior to divorce proceedings. If the special master's investigation confirms the preliminary evidence presented today, you may face additional sanctions. Is that understood? Tom nodded stiffly. Yes, Your Honor. Furthermore, the judge continued, the court is issuing a mutual restraining order prohibiting either party from contacting the other except through counsel. This includes sending third parties as intermediaries. She glanced at me. Mrs. Wilson, I understand Mr. Wilson's associate visited your home yesterday evening? Yes, Your Honor, I confirmed. That will not happen again, she stated firmly, looking directly at Tom. Any violation of this order will result in contempt charges. Are there any questions? Neither side had questions, and the hearing was adjourned. As we gathered our materials, Diane leaned close. That went even better than expected. The judge clearly saw through their tactics. I nodded, relief washing over me. The first major hurdle had been cleared. The assets remained frozen, preventing Tom from executing his plan to leave the country with his new life, funded by our marital resources. As we left the courtroom, Janet approached hesitantly. Mrs. Wilson, Nicole, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for not speaking up sooner. The subpoena actually made it easier. Tom can't retaliate against me for testifying under court order. Thank you for being here, I told her sincerely. It means a lot. She glanced around to ensure Tom wasn't nearby. There's something else you should know. The London transfer? It wasn't just Tom's idea. Vanessa's father is one of the senior partners at the London office. The whole position was created for Tom as a favor to her family. That's why they've been so confident about the move happening regardless of performance metrics. This was valuable information. It suggested the relationship had dimensions beyond a simple affair. There were family connections and professional entanglements that might explain why Tom had been willing to risk so much. After thanking Janet and promising to have Diane follow up with her, I headed home, experiencing the first genuine sense of optimism since discovering the credit card statement. The scales of justice were beginning to balance. Later that evening, Lisa came over with dinner and wine, providing much-needed moral support. As we sat in my kitchen, I found myself laughing for the first time in weeks at her colorful commentary on the situation. So let me get this straight, she said, refilling our glasses. He lectures you about being financially responsible while buying his mistress a Porsche, then acts surprised when you don't just roll over and let him take everything. The audacity of mediocre men never ceases to amaze me. It's not just that, I reflected. It's the realization that he genuinely believes he deserves everything. The successful career, the supportive wife at home, the younger girlfriend, the new life in London. And he expected to transition between these lives on his terms, with minimal inconvenience or consequence. Lisa raised her glass. Well, here's to inconvenient consequences. May they continue to rain down upon him. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling a surge of gratitude for friendship that had become even more valuable during this crisis. To consequences, I echoed, and to whatever comes next. What came next would prove to be even more revealing than I could have imagined. The weeks following the initial court hearing were a strange mix of legal victories and personal revelations. Tom had moved out of our home, presumably into the lakefront property with Vanessa, though he maintained a fiction of staying with his friend Mark when speaking to mutual acquaintances. The special master's investigation was proceeding, with daily discoveries of additional accounts and transactions Tom had concealed. I maintained my routine at the high school, finding unexpected comfort in the structured days and the genuine problems of my students. Their college application anxieties and relationship dramas provided perspective. Life would continue regardless of how my marriage ended. Several colleagues noticed the changes in me, a new confidence perhaps, or simply the absence of the constant anxiety I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. "You seem different lately," observed Ellen, the English teacher whose classroom was across from my counseling office. "More present." I considered this as we shared lunch in the faculty lounge. "I suppose I am. When you stop living for someone else's approval, you have more energy for everything else." Ellen didn't know about the divorce yet. I'd been private about the proceedings, sharing details only with Lisa and a small circle of trusted friends. The school's gossip network would eventually catch up, but for now, I appreciated the sanctuary of normal workdays. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael, the forensic accountant. "Found something interesting. Can you meet after work?" Replied with a quick affirmative, curious what new financial deception he'd uncovered. After my last student appointment, I drove to Diane's office, where Michael had set up his temporary base of operations. The conference room had transformed into an investigation hub, with financial documents covering every surface and digital forensics equipment humming in the corner. "You found something?" I asked, settling into a chair. Michael nodded, his expression serious. "Tom's been using client funds as personal investments. He's established a pattern of borrowing from managed accounts, using the money for short-term gains, then replacing it before quarterly reporting periods." Diane, who had joined us, frowned. "That's securities fraud. It goes beyond divorce proceedings." "There's more," Michael continued. "These transactions increased dramatically about 18 months ago, around the time he met Vanessa. The pattern suggests he was trying to impress her with his financial prowess and access to capital." I felt sick. "Are his clients at risk?" "Some already have losses they don't know about," Michael explained, showing me a spreadsheet. "He's been covering shortfalls in one account with funds from another, essentially a small-scale Ponzi scheme. It's only a matter of time before it collapses." Diane leaned forward. "Nicole, this changes our approach. We're no longer just dealing with marital asset division. We're potentially witnessing criminal activity. We have ethical obligations to consider." "What kind of obligations?" I asked, trying to process this escalation. "We may need to report these findings to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the State Bar Association," Diane explained. "But first, we need to ensure our evidence is airtight. A false accusation of securities fraud would be disastrous." I nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "What do you need from me?" "Access to any additional financial records you might remember," Michael said. "Specifically, were there ever client meetings at your home? Documents Tom might have left visible? Conversations about unusual transactions?" I thought back over 15 years of marriage, recalling snippets of information with new context. He occasionally hosted client dinners at our home. The Peterson account, he mentioned them just before all this started, said they were giving him trouble. Michael's eyes lit up. "Peterson. That name appears in several of these questionable transactions. Can you remember anything else about them?" I closed my eyes, visualizing a dinner party from the previous year. Older couple, retiring soon. They trusted Tom implicitly. Mr. Peterson mentioned how Tom was handling their entire nest egg and how grateful they were for his special attention to their account. Diane and Michael exchanged glances. We need to track the Peterson account specifically, Diane decided. If Tom has been mismanaging funds for clients approaching retirement, that's particularly egregious. Over the next hour, we developed a strategy for documenting the potential fraud without yet triggering external reporting requirements. The information would strengthen my position in the divorce, but more importantly, it might protect innocent clients from financial devastation. As I drove home, my mind raced with implications. Tom hadn't just betrayed me. He'd betrayed professional ethics, client trust, and possibly the law. The man I'd married, whom I'd believed to be ambitious but principled, had revealed himself to be someone who would risk others' financial security for his own gain and to impress a younger woman. My phone rang through the car's Bluetooth. It was a number I didn't recognize. Hello? I answered cautiously. Nicole? This is Robert Peterson. I nearly swerved in surprise. Had he somehow sensed we'd been discussing his account? Mr. Peterson? Hello. How did you get my number? From the firm's directory. I hope you don't mind the personal call, but Janet suggested I might reach out to you directly. Is now a good time? Janet, Tom's administrative assistant who had been feeding us information. What had she told him? Of course, I replied, pulling into a grocery store parking lot to focus on the conversation. What can I help you with? There was a pause, then, I understand you and Tom are separating. Janet didn't give details, but she hinted there might be some irregularities with accounts he's managing. My wife and I, well, Tom handles our retirement funds. Everything we've worked for is in his hands. My heart sank. The concern in his voice was palpable, the fear of a man who sensed his financial security might be at risk. Mr. Peterson, I think it would be best if we spoke in person. Are you free tomorrow? We arranged to meet at a coffee shop far from Tom's office. After hanging up, I immediately called Diane to inform her of this development. This is delicate, she cautioned. You can't explicitly warn him about potential fraud without evidence, but you have a moral obligation not to mislead him either. I'll prepare some general guidance about account reviews and financial safeguards you can share without crossing ethical lines. The next morning, I met Robert Peterson and his wife, Margaret, at the agreed location. They looked older than I remembered from dinner parties, more vulnerable. Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she stirred her tea. Thank you for meeting us, Robert began. We've been with Tom's firm for over a decade, but lately, things feel different. Statements are delayed. Tom's explanations about account movements are increasingly complex. When Janet mentioned your situation, we wondered if there might be a connection. I chose my words carefully, following Diane's guidance. I can't discuss specific details of my personal situation, but I believe it's always prudent for investors to regularly review their accounts and ask questions. When things aren't clear, have you considered getting a second opinion on your portfolio structure? Margaret leaned forward. Tom always discouraged that, said his strategies were proprietary and wouldn't make sense to other advisors. Red flag, I nodded sympathetically, while maintaining a neutral expression. Every investor has the right to understand where their money is invested. Perhaps you could request a complete statement of all holdings and transactions for the past year? We've tried, Robert admitted. Tom keeps saying there are reporting delays because of some special investments he's made on our behalf. Another red flag. I reached into my bag and retrieved a document Diane had prepared. A simple checklist of investor rights and warning signs of financial mismanagement, with no specific references to Tom or their situation. This might be helpful, I said, sliding it across the table. It's just general information about account transparency and investor protections. They studied the document, their expressions growing increasingly concerned. Several of these warning signs sound familiar, Margaret noted quietly. Robert looked up, his eyes meeting mine. Nicole, I need to ask directly. Should we be worried about our money? The question hung in the air between us. I thought of the ethical implications, weighing the Petersons' right to protect themselves against the legal constraints of my knowledge. If I were in your position, I said carefully, with my life savings managed by someone showing these warning signs, I would take immediate steps to verify my account status through independent channels. The firm has compliance officers who can provide account verification without going through Tom. Understanding dawned in Robert's eyes. He nodded slowly. Thank you. That's very illuminating. After they left, I called Diane to report the conversation. I stayed within the guidelines, I assured her, but they're definitely concerned, and with good reason. You did the right thing, she confirmed. And this interaction strengthens our case that Tom's conduct goes beyond marital issues. The special master will want to interview the Petersons as part of the financial investigation. 2 days later, the situation accelerated dramatically. I received an urgent call from Diane while teaching a senior seminar on college applications. Can you come to the office immediately? Her tone was tense. The Petersons contacted their firm's compliance department. Things are moving quickly. I arranged emergency coverage for my remaining appointments and drove straight to Diane's office. When I arrived, the conference room had expanded to include 2 new faces, a stern-looking woman in a charcoal suit and a middle-aged man with FBI credentials displayed. Nicole, this is Special Agent Harmon from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division and Ms. Chen from the Securities and Exchange Commission, Diane introduced them. They'd like to ask you some questions about Tom's business activities. My stomach dropped. The FBI, has something happened? Agent Harmon nodded grimly. The Petersons' request triggered an internal compliance review at your husband's firm. Preliminary findings suggest widespread account manipulation. The firm contacted federal authorities this morning. Ms. Chen added, we understand you're in divorce proceedings and have already identified potential financial improprieties. Your cooperation could be valuable to our investigation. For the next 3 hours, I answered questions about Tom's work habits, home office setup, conversations about clients, unusual spending patterns, and his relationship with Vanessa. I shared everything I could remember, including details about the London transfer plans. We believe Mr. Wilson was accelerating his timeline to leave the country because he sensed the scheme was becoming unsustainable, Agent Harmon explained. The London position would have given him access to international banking channels that might have complicated recovery efforts. As the questioning concluded, Ms. Chen handed me her card. You've been extremely helpful, Mrs. Wilson. We may need to speak with you again as the investigation progresses. After they left, I collapsed into a chair, emotionally drained. What happens now? I asked Diane. The criminal investigation will proceed independently of our divorce case, she explained. But it significantly strengthens our position. The special master will coordinate with federal authorities to ensure all assets are properly identified and frozen. And Tom? I asked, still processing the escalation to federal crimes. He'll likely be served with search warrants for his office, devices, and residences, including the lakefront property. If the evidence is as strong as it appears, arrest could follow quickly. The realization that my husband might face criminal charges was jarring, despite everything he'd done. 15 years of marriage, ending not just in divorce but potentially prison. I felt a complex mix of vindication, shock, and an unexpected twinge of sadness for the man I had once loved. I need some air, I said, standing abruptly. Diane nodded, understanding. Take time to process this. It's a lot to absorb. But Nicole, remember that you didn't cause this situation. Tom made these choices, repeatedly and deliberately. I drove to a nearby park, needing space to think. The autumn afternoon was crisp, leaves beginning to turn golden around the edges. I walked along a familiar path, remembering how Tom and I used to stroll here on Sunday mornings early in our marriage, planning our future together. How had we gone from those hopeful beginnings to federal investigations and betrayal? My phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "How dare you go to the authorities? You've ruined everything. Tom trusted you." Vanessa. I blocked the number without responding and immediately forwarded the message to Diane, adding it to the growing record of harassment despite court orders. As I continued walking, my phone rang again. Lisa this time. "Have you seen the news?" she asked without preamble. "What news?" "Turn on any financial channel. Tom's firm just announced they've uncovered irregularities in client accounts and are cooperating with federal authorities. They don't name Tom specifically, but the financial world isn't that big. People are connecting the dots." I found a bench and sat down heavily. "It's happening faster than I expected." "Are you okay?" Lisa's voice softened with concern. I don't know what I am," I admitted. "Relieved, vindicated, exhausted, all of the above?" "That's completely normal," she assured me. "This is uncharted territory. No one expects you to navigate it perfectly." After hanging up, I returned to my car and checked the news on my phone. Lisa was right. The story was breaking across financial media. Tom's firm had issued a carefully worded statement about a single advisor's actions being investigated, emphasizing their cooperation with authorities and commitment to client protection. I was driving home when Diane called again. "Tom's been detained for questioning," she reported. "No formal arrest yet, but the FBI executed search warrants at his office in the lakefront property. Janet called to let us know. She said it was quite dramatic." I tried to imagine the scene, Tom being escorted from his corner office, colleagues watching in shock, the FBI securing his computer and files. The man who had always prioritized his professional image above all else, now experiencing the ultimate public humiliation. "What about Vanessa?" I asked, recalling her threatening text. "Also being questioned," according to Janet. "Their relationship complicates things. They'll need to determine if she was complicit or merely benefiting unknowingly from the fraud proceeds." When I arrived home, my driveway was blocked by a black SUV. For a moment, I feared more federal agents, but then a familiar figure emerged, Tom's mother, Eleanor Wilson. My relationship with my mother-in-law had always been cordial, but distant. Eleanor was a proper Southern woman who valued appearance and social standing above emotional connection. She had always seemed to view me as slightly inadequate for her, only son though she masked it with impeccable manners. "Nicole," she greeted me stiffly as I exited my car. "I need to speak with you." I unlocked the front door, silently inviting her inside. In the kitchen, she declined my offer of tea, standing rigidly by the counter. "I've just come from the federal building," she began. "They're questioning Thomas. His attorney says he'll likely be formally arrested once questioning concludes." Her voice carried disbelief, as if she couldn't comprehend her son being treated like a common criminal. "I'm sorry you're going through this, Eleanor," I said sincerely. While I had no sympathy for Tom's situation, I recognized his mother was collateral damage in a crisis not of her making. "Are you?" she asked sharply. "You could stop this. Tell them it's a misunderstanding." I stared at her, genuinely confused. "Stop what? The fraud investigation? I don't have that power, Eleanor. The evidence speaks for itself." "Evidence you provided," she accused. "Thomas told me you're doing this for revenge because of that girl, that you're trying to ruin him because he fell in love with someone else." The familiar narrative, a man's infidelity, recast as romantic inevitability, his wife's legitimate grievances dismissed as vengeful jealousy. I'd expected better from Eleanor, whose own husband had remained devoted through 50 years of marriage. "That's not accurate," I replied calmly. The federal investigation was triggered by client complaints, not by me. Tom has apparently been misappropriating client funds, including those belonging to people approaching retirement. That has nothing to do with his affair. Eleanor's expression faltered. He wouldn't. Thomas values his professional reputation above everything. Yes, I agreed. He does, which makes his actions even more inexplicable. But the evidence exists, Eleanor. Multiple agencies are involved now. This goes far beyond our marital problems. She sank onto a kitchen stool, age suddenly visible in the slump of her shoulders. I don't understand. We raised him better than this. In that moment, I felt genuine compassion for her. Eleanor had built her identity around her son's success, taking pride in his Ivy League education, his professional achievements, his place in society. The revelation that it might all be built on fraud was devastating. People make choices, I said gently. Sometimes bad ones, despite their upbringing. This isn't a reflection on you. She looked up, tears glistening in eyes so similar to her son's. Will you visit him? If he's arrested? I finished when she couldn't. I don't think that would help either of us, Eleanor. Our marriage effectively ended when he began planning a new life with Vanessa. The legal proceedings are separate issues. After she left, I sat alone in the kitchen, emotionally drained. Despite everything, part of me mourned for the man Tom might have been. The one I thought I'd married. Had he always been capable of such deception? Or had something changed him? Was Vanessa the catalyst, or merely a symptom of his moral decline? The next morning brought news I'd been half expecting. Tom had been formally arrested and charged with multiple counts of securities: fraud, wire fraud, and financial elder abuse. The last charge stemmed from the Petersons' case and others like it, where Tom had specifically targeted retirement accounts of older clients who trusted him implicitly. His bail was set at $2 million, a sum that would have been easily manageable just weeks ago, but with assets frozen and accounts under investigation, suddenly problematic. According to Janet, who had become our reliable inside source, the firm had terminated him immediately and was distancing itself publicly, claiming ignorance of his activities despite years of warning signs. Diane called to discuss implications for our divorce proceedings. The criminal case will likely take precedence, she explained, but it actually simplifies some aspects of the divorce. The court has even stronger grounds to grant you a favorable settlement given the documented fraud. What about the Porsche and lakefront property? I asked, thinking about the symbols of Tom's betrayal that had first alerted me to the scale of his deception. Both will be considered proceeds of criminal activity as well as marital assets, Diane explained. The government may seize them as part of asset forfeiture, but you would have a claim for compensation from any recovered funds. My phone buzzed with another text, this time from Lisa. Just saw the mugshot on the news, not his best photo. Wine tonight? Despite everything, I smiled. Lisa's gallows humor had been a lifeline throughout this ordeal. Definitely, I texted back. That evening, Lisa arrived bearing 2 bottles of wine and takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant. We settled in my living room, the news muted in the background where Tom's arrest was still making headlines. Quite a fall from grace, Lisa commented, glancing at the screen where they showed footage of Tom being escorted into the federal building. Have you heard from Vanessa again? I shook my head. Not since that threatening text. According to Janet, she's claiming complete ignorance of Tom's financial misdeeds. Says she thought his lavish spending was simply a reflection of his success. Convenient, Lisa snorted. She enjoyed the benefits while claiming no knowledge of their source. Classic. The prosecutors will sort it out, I said, surprised by my own detachment. My focus now is rebuilding my life after Tom. The divorce feels almost secondary to that bigger project. Lisa raised her glass. to new beginnings, and to karma finally catching up with Tom Wilson. I clinked my glass against hers, reflecting on the unexpected trajectory my life had taken since discovering that credit card statement. The pain of betrayal remained, but it was increasingly overshadowed by a sense of emerging strength and clarity about my own values. The following Monday, I returned to work to find my colleagues buzzing with the news. Tom's arrest had made local headlines, and the school community was small enough that connections were quickly made. Rather than hiding from the attention, I decided to address it directly in a brief email to the faculty, acknowledging the situation and requesting professional space to continue serving our students effectively. The response was overwhelmingly supportive. Several colleagues stopped by my office with coffee or simply to express solidarity. Even the school principal, a normally reserved administrator, made a point of checking in. "If you need time off, just say the word," she offered. "But if work helps provide normalcy, we're glad to have you here." "Work definitely helps," I assured her. "My students deserve consistency, especially with college application season in full swing." As the week progressed, Tom's case continued to develop. The count of affected client accounts grew, with estimated losses exceeding $7 million. His legal team attempted to secure his release on bail, but the judge denied their request, citing flight risk given his documented plans to relocate internationally. Janet provided ongoing updates about the firm's internal response, describing a frantic effort to review all client accounts and repair relationships damaged by Tom's actions. Several senior partners had been conducting personal outreach to affected clients, including the Petersons, who had become key witnesses in the case. On Thursday afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor at my office, Special Agent Harmon from the FBI. "Mrs. Wilson, thank you for making time," he said as he settled into the chair across from my desk. "I wanted to update you personally on certain developments in your husband's case." I set aside the college recommendation I'd been writing. That's considerate, but unexpected. Is something wrong? Not wrong necessarily, but complicated. We've been reviewing Mr. Wilson's communications, and we've discovered messages suggesting Vanessa Carter was more involved than initially claimed. She appears to have actively encouraged him to accelerate client fund misappropriation to finance their lifestyle and London relocation plans. This confirmation of Vanessa's complicity wasn't surprising, but the agent's personal delivery of the news was. "Why tell me this in person?" Agent Harmon's expression became more serious. "Because we've also discovered threats directed at you, messages between them discussing how to ensure your silence if you discovered their plans. Some options discussed were concerning." A chill ran through me. "What kind of threats?" "Nothing with concrete planning, but discussions about potential accidents, fabricated mental health concerns that could affect your credibility, even suggestions about planting evidence to create legal problems for you." He leaned forward. "We don't believe they acted on any of these discussions, but given the seriousness of the content, we felt you should be aware." I struggled to process this information. Tom hadn't just planned to leave me. He and Vanessa had contemplated harming me if I interfered with their plans. The man I'd shared a bed with for 15 years had considered staging an accident for me. "We're taking these threats seriously," Agent Harmon continued. "Ms. Carter was taken into custody this morning on conspiracy charges. I've arranged for increased patrol presence in your neighborhood as a precaution, though we have no evidence of current threat." After he left, I sat motionless at my desk, the college recommendation forgotten. The betrayal had reached a level I hadn't imagined possible. Financial deception and infidelity were painful enough, but contemplating harm to ensure my silence? It revealed a darkness in Tom I'd never glimpsed during our marriage. I called Diane immediately to relay this new information. "This changes our security approach," she said firmly. "I'm sending over references for home security upgrades today. And Nicole? You should consider a temporary restraining order against Eleanor Wilson as well." Tom's mother? I asked, surprised. She's upset, but I don't think she's dangerous. Agent Harmon didn't mention it, but we received information that she's been attempting to access your financial records through Tom's old contacts at the bank. She may be trying to help him move or hide assets despite the freeze. We can't be too careful. The web of betrayal continued to expand, drawing in even peripheral figures in Tom's life. How many people had he corrupted with his desperate attempts to maintain his scheme? And how many innocent victims, clients like the Petersons, colleagues who trusted him, even his own mother, were left dealing with the consequences? That evening, as I implemented the first of the security upgrades Diane had recommended, changing locks and installing cameras, I felt a strange sense of clarity emerging from the chaos. Every new revelation distanced me further from the marriage and the life I'd thought I was living. Each betrayal confirmed that moving forward alone was not just necessary, but desirable. My phone rang, Janet calling after hours. "Nicole, I thought you should know right away. The firm just discovered offshore accounts in Vanessa's name, with substantial transfers from client funds. And there's something else, documentation of property purchases in her family's name in London. It appears they were setting up a life, there using stolen money with plans to leave immediately after your birthday next month." My birthday. The final piece clicked into place. Tom hadn't been planning to tell me about the divorce until after my birthday celebration, a party I insisted on hosting at an exclusive restaurant. He would have announced our separation publicly, presenting himself as the magnanimous husband who had waited until after my milestone birthday to break the news. The perfect exit strategy, maintaining his image while moving seamlessly to his new life. Except it had all unraveled because of a misdirected credit card statement and a wife who finally decided to question the inconsistencies she'd been trained to ignore. "Thank you for telling me," I told Janet. "Are you doing okay? This must be difficult for you too." She sighed audibly. "It's been challenging. The firm is in damage control mode. Clients are panicking, and I'm constantly being questioned about what I knew. But I'll land on my feet. 20 years as a legal secretary, I've developed survival skills." After we hung up, I opened my laptop and began a document I'd been contemplating for days, a victim impact statement for Tom's eventual sentencing. The prosecutors had mentioned I would have the option to address the court, to give voice to the personal impact of his crimes beyond the financial damage to clients. I began typing, the words flowing more easily than expected. I met Thomas Wilson when I was 23, fresh out of graduate school and idealistic about changing lives. Through education, he was 25, ambitious and charismatic, already showing promise in financial services. For 15 years, I believed we were building a life together based on shared values and mutual respect. The act of documenting our history, the real history, not the sanitized version we'd presented socially, was unexpectedly cathartic. Each paragraph helped me reclaim my narrative from the fiction Tom had constructed. By the time I finished the first draft, 3 hours later, I felt lighter somehow, as if setting down a burden I'd carried too long. The next morning, Diane called, with news that Vanessa had agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for reduced charges. She would testify against Tom, providing details about their planning and his methods for concealing the fraud. "This essentially guarantees conviction," Diane explained. "With client documentation, forensic evidence, and now insider testimony, his legal team will almost certainly seek a plea deal." "And the divorce?" I asked, wondering how these criminal proceedings would affect our case. "The judge has indicated willingness to proceed with property division despite the pending criminal case," Diane replied. "Given the overwhelming evidence of fraud and misappropriation, she's inclined to award you the maximum possible settlement under state law." I considered this news, realizing that what once would have seemed like vindication now felt hollow. No financial settlement could restore the years I'd invested in a marriage built on deception or erase the betrayal of discovering my husband had contemplated harming me to protect his schemes. "The money doesn't matter much anymore," I admitted. "I just want this chapter closed so I can move forward." "I understand," Diane said gently. "But financial security is part of moving forward. The settlement will ensure you have resources to rebuild your life however you choose. That's not vindictive. It's practical." She was right, of course. After supporting Tom's career for 15 years, often at the expense of my own professional advancement, I deserved financial stability. Not as punishment for his betrayal, but as recognition of my contributions to the life we'd built together. A life he had systematically dismantled for his own selfish purposes. As we discussed next steps, I felt an unexpected sense of gratitude for the team that had assembled around me during this crisis. Diane with her legal expertise and steady guidance, Michael, who had unraveled Tom's financial deceptions, Janet providing crucial inside information, Lisa offering unwavering emotional support, even Agent Harmon ensuring my physical safety. The contrast with Tom couldn't have been starker. While he had surrounded himself with co-conspirators and enablers for his schemes, I had found authentic allies committed to justice and truth. It was a distinction that reflected the fundamental values separating us, values I had recognized too late in our marriage, but would carry forward into whatever came next. That evening, as I worked in my garden, a space I'd neglected during the tumultuous weeks since discovering Tom's betrayal, I received a text from an unknown number. "The firm is imploding. 6 partners resigned today. Client exodus accelerating." Thought, "You should know. Janet, using a new number, continuing to keep me informed despite potential professional risk." I saved the contact under a pseudonym, mindful of the ongoing security concerns, and replied with simple thanks. As I returned to tending my neglected plants, I reflected on Janet's update. Tom's actions had created ripples affecting countless others, colleagues losing jobs, clients facing financial uncertainty, a respected firm fighting for survival. The scope of destruction from his selfish choices was still expanding, touching lives far removed from our marriage. In contrast, my own path was finally becoming clearer. The garden around me, overgrown but resilient, seemed an apt metaphor for my situation, neglected during a difficult season but ready for renewal with proper care and attention. I pulled weeds with renewed purpose, making space for new growth. Tomorrow would bring more developments in both the criminal case and divorce proceedings. There would be difficult moments ahead, more revelations and complications to navigate. But for the first time since finding that credit card statement, I felt genuinely optimistic about my future. A future shaped by my own choices rather than Tom's deceptions. The sun was setting as I finished in the garden, washing soil from my hands and surveying my progress. Like the garden, my life remained a work in progress, but the initial clearing had been accomplished. The ground was prepared. Now it was time to decide what to plant in this new season. What values, relationships, and pursuits would define the next chapter of my life. And unlike the carefully curated existence I'd shared with Tom, this new life would be authentically mine, built on hard-won wisdom and genuine connections rather than appearances and deception. There was freedom in that realization, a sense of possibility that transcended the pain of betrayal. I picked up my phone to text Lisa. Garden therapy. Session complete. Ready for whatever comes next. 3 months after Tom's arrest, life had settled into a new rhythm. The criminal case was proceeding through the legal system, with Tom still in custody after being denied bail a second time. Vanessa had struck a plea deal, agreeing to testify against him in exchange for reduced charges. The firm had implemented a client recovery program, attempting to rebuild trust and reimburse those affected by Tom's fraud. My divorce proceedings had accelerated, with the judge granting an expedited timeline given the extraordinary circumstances. The financial investigation had uncovered the full extent of Tom's deception. Nearly $12 million in misappropriated client funds over a 3-year period, with the pace escalating dramatically after Vanessa entered the picture. Winter had descended on the city, bringing short days and long nights that mirrored my contemplative mood. The initial shock and pain of betrayal had evolved into something more measured, a clear-eyed assessment of the marriage I'd thought I had and the reality that had existed beneath the surface. One snowy Tuesday evening, I was grading scholarship essays when my doorbell rang. Through the security camera Diane had insisted I install, I saw Robert and Margaret Peterson standing on my porch, bundled against the cold. I invited them in, offering hot tea as they settled in my living room. "We won't take much of your time," Robert began, accepting the steaming mug gratefully. "We just wanted to thank you in person. The firm's recovery program is restoring our funds. Without your intervention, we might have lost everything." Margaret nodded emphatically. "When we read about the scope of the fraud in the paper, we realized how close we came to disaster. Our entire retirement, everything we'd worked for." Her voice trailed off, and I saw the fear that lingered despite the financial recovery. The security they'd taken for granted had been revealed as fragile, dependent on the honesty of others. It was a vulnerability I understood all too well. "I'm glad the firm is making things right," I said sincerely. "You deserved better than to have your trust betrayed." Robert set down his mug. "That's actually why we're here. The prosecutor asked if we'd be willing to give victim impact statements at the sentencing hearing. We wanted to ask how you feel about that, given your personal connection." I considered the question carefully. I think victim impact statements are important. They remind the court that financial crimes have real human consequences. They're not just numbers on a spreadsheet. "Will you be giving one?" Margaret asked gently. "Yes," I confirmed, "but from a different perspective than yours. The court needs to hear from all of us to understand the full impact of Tom's actions." After they left, I returned to the scholarship essays, but my focus had shifted. The Petersons' visit reminded me how many lives had been affected by Tom's choices. Not just mine, but dozens of clients, colleagues, even family members drawn into the widening circle of consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "News just broke. Vanessa's formal statement was released as part of court filings. It's illuminating. Call me when you can." I finished grading the essay in front of me, then called Lisa, putting her on speaker as I prepared dinner. "Have you seen it yet?" she asked immediately. "No, I've been meeting with the Petersons. What does it say?" "It's a detailed account of how she and Tom planned everything," Lisa explained. She claims it started as a normal workplace flirtation, but evolved when Tom began sharing his frustrations about his marriage and career plateau. According to her statement, she suggested the London transfer as a fresh start, and he began misappropriating funds to create the lifestyle that would impress her family there. I chopped vegetables with perhaps more force than necessary. "That tracks with what we've learned. What's new?" "The timeline," Lisa said. "According to Vanessa, Tom had been planning to leave you for over 2 years. The delay was purely financial. He needed time to siphon enough money to maintain their lifestyle without your income supplementing his. 2 years. The knowledge settled heavily in my chest. While I'd been planning anniversary trips and supporting his career, he'd been methodically preparing to discard our marriage. The calculated nature of the betrayal still had the power to wound, even after everything else that had happened. "There's more," Lisa continued, her voice gentler now. She describes how Tom specifically targeted client accounts of people near retirement age, believing they checked their statements less frequently and were more trusting of his explanations for investment strategies they didn't understand. "Like the Petersons," I murmured, thinking of their visit. "Exactly." She also details how they chose the Maldives trip as the moment to serve you divorce papers. Remote location, limited communications, no immediate access to legal support. They thought it would pressure you into accepting unfavorable terms. The pieces continued to fall into place. The anniversary trip Tom had insisted on booking, his sudden interest in returning to where we'd honeymooned, the secretive phone calls about travel arrangements. What had seemed like romantic gestures were actually calculated tactical decisions. "Is there anything about what they plan to do with me afterward?" I asked, remembering Agent Harmon's warning about concerning discussions. Lisa hesitated. "Yes, but it's vague. She mentions Tom was concerned about potential interference, and they discussed contingency plans if you became difficult about the divorce. The prosecutor has apparently redacted specific details." After we hung up, I sat with this new information, letting it settle into the narrative I'd been constructing about my marriage. The timeline adjustment was significant, not a recent infatuation that had destroyed our marriage, but a long-term deception running parallel to what I'd thought was a stable, if imperfect, relationship. The next morning, I received a call from Diane. "Have you seen Vanessa's statement?" Lisa filled me in last night. 2 years of planning, targeting vulnerable clients, the Maldives divorce strategy. "There's been a development overnight," Diane said. "Tom's attorney contacted the prosecutor about a possible plea deal. Apparently, Vanessa's statement changed their defense strategy." "He's going to plead guilty?" I asked, surprised. Tom had maintained his innocence despite mounting evidence, insisting there were legitimate explanations for the financial irregularities. "It looks that way. His attorney is trying to negotiate terms, but with Vanessa's testimony and the forensics evidence, they're in a weak position. The prosecutor expects a plea within days." This shift felt significant. The first acknowledgement of wrongdoing from the man who had spent months proclaiming his innocence to anyone who would listen. I wondered what had finally broken his resolve. Was it Vanessa's betrayal? The weight of evidence? Or simply the recognition that his carefully constructed facade had irreparably crumbled? 2 days later, the news became official. Tom had accepted a plea deal, admitting to multiple counts of securities fraud, wire fraud, and financial exploitation of the elderly. The agreement included a recommended sentence of 15 years, with the possibility of parole after 10, plus restitution to all affected clients. As part of the agreement, he would provide a full accounting of all misappropriated funds and assist in recovery efforts. In exchange, certain charges related to money laundering and conspiracy were reduced or dropped entirely. Diane called to discuss implications for our divorce. With the guilty plea, the division of assets becomes even more straightforward. Most of what Tom claimed as separate property has now been established as proceeds of criminal activity. The court will likely award you the maximum allowable portion of legitimate marital assets. "What about the Porsche?" I asked, still fixated on the symbol of his betrayal that had started this journey. "Interesting timing on that question," Diane replied. "The vehicle was seized as part of asset forfeiture, but given that it was purchased with marital funds and you're an innocent spouse, you have priority claim. The prosecutor's office just indicated they're willing to release it to you once proper documentation is filed." The idea of claiming the Porsche, the car Tom had bought for Vanessa while telling me we couldn't afford to replace my aging Honda, carried a certain poetic justice. Not because I particularly wanted a flashy sports car, but because it represented reclaiming what had been taken from me. "Let's file the paperwork," I decided. "And for the house, I think I'm ready to sell it. Too many memories." "I'll get the listing process started," Diane confirmed. "The real estate market is strong. Right now, with the equity and your portion of the settlement, you'll have a solid financial foundation for whatever comes next." Whatever comes next. The phrase resonated with possibility rather than uncertainty. For the first time in months, perhaps years, my future wasn't tethered to Tom's plans or priorities. The realization was both exhilarating and intimidating. That weekend, Lisa helped me sort through personal items in preparation for eventually selling the house. We tackled the master bedroom closet first, separating my clothes from the few items Tom had left behind when he moved out. "What should we do with his things?" Lisa asked, holding up an expensive cashmere sweater I had given him for Christmas. "Donate everything," I decided, "except the things his mother might want. Those we can box up for Eleanor." My relationship with Tom's mother had evolved into something unexpectedly civil after her initial anger. Once the evidence of her son's crimes became indisputable, she had reached out with a handwritten note expressing regret for her accusations and acknowledging the pain her son had caused. We weren't close, but we had established a fragile peace, built on mutual recognition of how thoroughly Tom had deceived us both. As we worked, Lisa updated me on common acquaintances from Tom's firm. Alex took a position at a smaller investment company. He said the atmosphere at the firm became toxic after everything came out. Too much suspicion, too many questions about who might have known or enabled Tom's activities. Alex had been Tom's colleague for years, someone we'd socialized with regularly. I wondered how many of our supposed friends had suspected something was amiss in our marriage or Tom's business practices, but remained silent. "Has he reached out to you at all?" Lisa asked carefully. "No, and I don't expect him to," I replied, sorting through a drawer of scarves. "Most of Tom's colleagues have kept their distance. I think they're afraid I'll somehow taint them by association, or worse, that I might reveal things Tom told me about their own practices." "Their loss," Lisa said firmly, tossing another of Tom's abandoned dress shirts into the donation pile. "Anyone who can't see your worth independent of Tom doesn't deserve your friendship anyway." We worked through the afternoon, gradually transforming the space that had once represented my shared life with Tom into something that felt more wholly mine. Each item sorted and each decision made reinforced my growing sense of autonomy. In the back of the closet, behind rarely used luggage, I discovered a small lockbox I didn't recognize. It was secured with a combination lock, but when I tried, our anniversary date, Tom's default password for everything, it clicked open. Inside, I found documents I hadn't seen before. Preliminary paperwork for the London transfer, brochures for private schools near the Kensington property they'd planned to purchase, and most jarring, a handwritten letter from Vanessa dated nearly 2 years earlier, outlining her vision for our future together. "Look at this," I said, handing the letter to Lisa. She was mapping out their life together while I was still planning our anniversary celebration. Lisa scanned the letter, her expression darkening. The deliberate nature of it all, the planning, the deception, maintaining 2 parallel lives for years. It's pathological. I took back the letter, reading a passage that particularly stung. "We deserve the life we're creating together. After years of compromising your talents and ambitions, to support a wife who doesn't truly understand your potential, you'll finally have a partner worthy of your brilliance." The dismissive characterization of me and our marriage was painful but illuminating. In Vanessa's narrative, and presumably Tom's as well, I had been reduced to an obstacle, a burden limiting his potential rather than the supportive partner I'd believed myself to be. She didn't know me at all, I realized aloud. Neither of them did. They created a convenient fiction about who I was to justify their betrayal. "Classic rationalization," Lisa agreed, taking the letter and dropping it decisively into the trash. "They needed to make you into something less to excuse their behavior." The discovery of the lockbox reinforced my decision to sell the house. How many other hidden reminders might be lurking in corners and crevices? Better to start fresh in a space untouched by deception. The following Tuesday, I received notice that the paperwork for the Porsche had been processed. The vehicle was being released from impound and would be available the following day. Oddly, this development coincided with Tom's formal sentencing hearing, a coincidence that felt meaningful, though I couldn't articulate exactly why. I had submitted my victim impact statement to the court, but had decided not to attend the sentencing in person. The prosecutor had assured me this was completely acceptable and that my written statement would be given full consideration by the judge. My decision mystified some people. Lisa had asked if I didn't want to see Tom face consequences directly, but it felt right to me. Witnessing his sentencing wouldn't provide additional closure. My healing wasn't dependent on seeing him in handcuffs or prison attire. Instead, on the day of his sentencing, I arranged to pick up the Porsche. The impound lot was on the industrial edge of the city, a fenced compound of seized vehicles ranging from battered economy cars to luxury models like the one I'd come to claim. An officer guided me through the process, handling the paperwork, with efficient courtesy. "Vehicle's been detailed and maintained while in custody," he explained, leading me to where the black Porsche gleamed under fluorescent lights. "Battery's been kept charged, and we ran it periodically to keep everything in working order." He handed me the keys, the same keys I'd watched Tom give to Vanessa on that pivotal night when I'd followed him to the lakefront house. The memory felt distant now, almost as if it had happened to someone else. "Everything okay, ma'am?" the officer asked, noting my hesitation. "Yes, just processing," I replied, clicking the key fob. The car chirped in response, doors unlocking, with an expensive-sounding thunk. I slid into the driver's seat, adjusting it forward to accommodate my height, which was several inches less than Vanessa's. The interior smelled of leather and unfamiliar perfume. Expensive, but too sweet for my taste. The dashboard was a sophisticated array of digital displays and controls, far more complex than my practical Honda. As I turned the key, the engine purred to life with a sound engineered to suggest power and prestige. I wondered if Tom had chosen this specific model for its status value rather than any particular driving feature. It seemed like something he would do, prioritize appearance over substance. Following the officer's directions, I navigated out of the impound lot and onto the main road, getting a feel for the vehicle's handling. It responded with precision to the slightest touch, accelerating smoothly as I merged onto the highway. My phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system, Diane checking in. "How does it feel to be driving Tom's trophy gift?" she asked after I accepted the call. "Surreal," I admitted, adjusting to the low profile of the sports car. "It's objectively an impressive vehicle, but it feels like a stranger's car, not something I would have chosen for myself." "The sentencing just concluded," Diane informed me. 15 years, as per the plea agreement, with the possibility of parole after 10. The judge accepted the prosecutor's recommendations almost entirely, with additional requirements for financial restitution. I processed this information as I drove, feeling a complex mix of emotions. 15 years, roughly the same length as our marriage. There was a symmetry there that felt significant. The life we had built together and the life he had destroyed through fraud would each claim approximately the same portion of his timeline. "How do you feel?" Diane asked when I didn't immediately respond. "I'm not sure," I answered honestly. "Relieved that it's resolved? Sad about the waste of potential?" "Mostly. I think I feel ready to focus on the future rather than the past." After hanging up, I continued driving with no particular destination, testing the car's capabilities on the open highway. It was undeniably well-engineered, responding with precision to each input. Yet something felt performative about it, a vehicle designed to announce status and demand attention rather than simply provide transportation. Without conscious planning, I found myself driving toward the lakefront area, toward the modern house Tom had purchased for his new life with Vanessa. I knew from Janet that the property had been seized and would eventually be sold as part of asset forfeiture, with proceeds going toward client restitution. I parked across the street, studying the architectural lines of the house with its walls of glass overlooking the water. In another life, I might have admired its design features. Now, I saw it as a monument to deception, a physical manifestation of the separate life Tom had been constructing while maintaining our marriage as a convenient facade. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "Sentencing news is breaking on local stations. You okay?" "I'm fine," I replied. "Actually sitting outside the lakefront house in the Porsche. Sounds strange when I type it out." Her response was immediate. "Closure or masochism? Either way, I've got wine waiting whenever you're done with your symbolic moment." She understood me well. This was indeed a symbolic moment, confronting the physical spaces of betrayal from a position of knowledge and strength rather than ignorance and vulnerability. As I prepared to drive away, a luxury SUV pulled into the driveway of the house. Next door, a woman emerged, stylishly dressed, roughly my age, and did a double-take at the sight of the Porsche. She approached cautiously, recognition dawning on her face. "You're Nicole Wilson," she said, stopping at a respectful distance. "I recognized you from the news coverage. I'm Melissa Chen. I live next door." I nodded, unsure what to expect from this encounter. "I just wanted to say—" She hesitated. "We saw things. My husband and I. The comings and goings at all hours. The obvious nature of their relationship. We should have reached out somehow, but we didn't know you and it felt presumptuous." Her voice trailed off, discomfort evident in her expression. I recognized the guilt of the bystander, the person who sees something wrong but finds reasons not to intervene. "You had no obligation to get involved," I assured her. "And honestly, would I have believed you? Probably not. I needed to discover the truth myself." She nodded, relief softening her features. "The house has been empty since they were arrested. There's been talk about it being sold soon." "That's my understanding," I confirmed. "Part of the asset recovery process." Melissa glanced at the Porsche, making the connection. "Is that why?" "Yes. Reclaimed as part of the settlement. Ironic, isn't it? The car he bought for her, while telling me we couldn't afford to replace my old Honda." She shook her head, incredulous. Men can be remarkably short-sighted. My first husband tried something similar. Not quite so elaborate, but the same general disregard. That's how I ended up in this neighborhood, actually. Divorce settlement from a cheating spouse. The parallel made me smile despite the circumstances. "How did you move forward? After, I mean." "One day at a time," she replied thoughtfully. "Rebuilding, reflecting, eventually forgiving. Not for his sake, but for mine. And finding better relationships based on mutual respect rather than appearance." She gestured toward her home. "My second husband is nothing like the first. We value honesty above everything." As I drove away from the lakefront area, Melissa's words resonated. One day at a time. Rebuilding. The path forward wasn't about dramatic gestures or perfect clarity, but small, consistent choices that gradually constructed a new reality. I headed to Lisa's apartment, the Porsche drawing attention at every stoplight. The car represented financial value, of course. I could sell it and use the proceeds toward my fresh start, but its symbolic value was equally significant. Driving it wasn't about claiming Tom's gift to Vanessa. It was about reclaiming resources that should have supported our shared life rather than his secret one. Lisa was waiting with the promised wine and Chinese takeout. "So," she said as I settled onto her couch, "how was your tour of betrayal locations in your revenge mobile?" I laughed at her characterization. "Strangely therapeutic, and I met one of their neighbors, another woman who rebuilt after divorce. It was, I don't know, affirming somehow." "Speaking of rebuilding," Lisa said, pouring wine, "have you thought more about what's next? Will you stay at the school?" The question had been on my mind frequently in recent weeks. I love counseling students, I reflected. But I'm considering expanding, maybe private practice focusing on women navigating major life transitions. I've certainly gained relevant experience. "That's perfect," Lisa enthused. "You could help women dealing with divorce, career changes, empty nests. All those pivot points where people need guidance but not necessarily traditional therapy. As we talked, the vision gained clarity. Not just private practice, but workshops, support groups, perhaps even a book eventually. The painful experience of Tom's betrayal could be transformed into something constructive, helping others navigate similar challenges. Later that evening, driving back to the house that would soon no longer be mine, I made a decision about the Porsche. I would keep it temporarily, a tangible reminder of reclaiming what was rightfully mine, but eventually, I would sell it and use the proceeds to fund the next chapter of my life. The car Tom had bought to impress his mistress would ultimately finance my professional reinvention. There was a satisfying symmetry in that outcome. Resources intended to facilitate my replacement would instead fund my renewal. The next morning, I arrived at school in the Porsche, causing inevitable curiosity among colleagues and students. Rather than avoiding the questions, I decided to address them directly, sharing an abbreviated version of recent events with the faculty during the morning meeting. Some of you may have seen news coverage about my husband's legal troubles. I began. The details aren't important for this setting, but I wanted you to hear directly from me that we're divorcing, and I'm moving forward with plans for a new chapter in my life. The response was overwhelmingly supportive. Ellen, my English teacher friend, immediately offered help with house hunting in her neighborhood. The principal assured me of the school's continued support, including flexibility with my schedule as needed for legal proceedings. Most touching was the reaction from several female colleagues who approached privately throughout the day, sharing their own experiences with betrayal and renewal. Each conversation reinforced my emerging vision of creating resources for women, navigating similar transitions. After school, I had scheduled a meeting with a real estate agent to discuss listing the house. As we walked through the rooms, discussing cosmetic updates and staging strategies, I found myself increasingly detached from the space that had once been the center of my life with Tom. The market is very strong right now, the agent explained. With minor updates and proper staging, we should attract multiple offers quickly. The neighborhood and architectural style are both highly desirable. We settled on a timeline: minor repairs and painting over the next 2 weeks, professional staging the following week, listing by month end. The proceeds from the sale, combined with my share of remaining marital assets, would provide the financial foundation for whatever came next. As the agent left, I stood in the empty kitchen, remembering the moment I'd discovered the credit card statement that had started this journey. So much had changed since that evening, not just my circumstances, but my fundamental understanding of my marriage, and more importantly, myself. The woman who had hesitated to question her husband's explanations no longer existed. In her place stood someone more discerning, more confident in her own perceptions, more willing to advocate for herself. The transformation hadn't been easy or painless, but it was undeniably real. My phone buzzed with a text from Diane. Sentencing coverage made national news, reporters asking for interviews. Your thoughts? I considered the request carefully. Initially, I had avoided media attention, prioritizing privacy during the chaotic early stages of discovery and legal proceedings. But now, with Tom sentenced and my own path forward becoming clearer, perhaps there was value in sharing my experience. Not to extend Tom's humiliation or portray myself as a victim, but to offer insights that might help others recognize warning signs I had missed. To demonstrate that betrayal, while devastating, needn't be defining. To show that renewal was possible, even after the collapse of a 15-year marriage built on deception. I'll consider selective interviews, I replied, but focused on moving forward, not rehashing details of the fraud or affair. Diane's response was immediate. I'll screen requests carefully, only reputable outlets with thoughtful approaches. That evening, as I began packing non-essential items in preparation for eventually moving, I came across our wedding album, tucked away on a bookshelf I rarely accessed. The leather-bound volume felt heavier than its physical weight warranted. laden with memories and meanings that had shifted dramatically. I opened it carefully, studying the faces of our younger selves. Tom at 25, already exuding the confidence that had attracted me initially. Myself at 23, radiating joy and certainty about our shared future. Both of us believing, or at least I had believed, that we were embarking on a lifetime partnership, built on mutual respect and shared values. Had any of it been real? Had the man who stood before friends and family promising lifelong fidelity and partnership ever intended to honor those commitments? Or had I simply been a convenient first wife? Someone supportive and undemanding who could help establish his career before he moved on to what he truly wanted? These questions had consumed me in the early days after discovering his betrayal. Now, they seemed less important. Whatever Tom's initial intentions, whatever combination of character flaws and circumstances had led to his choices, the outcome remained the same. Our marriage had ended not through mutual growth apart or irreconcilable differences, but through calculated deception. I closed the album and placed it in a box labeled "To Decide," uncertain whether I would ultimately keep this record of a ceremony that had proven meaningless or discard it as part of my fresh start. Like so many aspects of this transition, the decision didn't need to be made immediately. The next morning brought an unexpected email from Janet, Tom's former administrative assistant, who had provided crucial information during the investigation. Accepting a position with a smaller firm across town. Before leaving, found something you should have. Can we meet? I arranged to meet her for coffee that afternoon between student appointments. Janet arrived looking more relaxed than I'd seen her throughout the investigation. The constant anxiety of her position at the compromised firm finally lifting. "I've been organizing files before my departure," she explained after ordering. "The firm is still dealing with fallout from Tom's actions. Several partners have left. Client trust is shattered. Regulatory scrutiny is intense. It's not a healthy environment." "I'm glad you found something new," I said sincerely. Janet had been collateral damage in Tom's schemes. Her loyalty to the firm exploited and her professional reputation jeopardized by association. She nodded, pulling an envelope from her bag. "I found this while clearing out secure storage. It's your original prenuptial agreement, the actual signed document. I thought you should have it rather than leaving it in the firm's archives." I accepted the envelope, surprised. "Thank you, but Diane already has a copy. It was part of the divorce filings." Janet's expression turned serious. "You should compare them. The version in storage doesn't match what was filed with the court. There are discrepancies." My stomach tightened. What kind of discrepancies? Pages that appear to have been substituted, clauses that differ in significant ways. I noticed because I was the witness for the original signing 15 years ago. The document in storage has my signature, but some sections don't match what I remember witnessing. The implications were staggering. If Tom had altered our prenuptial agreement before filing it with the divorce court, it would constitute fraud upon the court, a serious offense that could further impact the asset division and potentially lead to additional criminal charges. "Does anyone at the firm know you found this?" I asked, carefully placing the envelope in my bag. Janet shook her head. "I accessed the storage area legitimately as part of my transition duties, but no one knows I've removed anything. Given everything that's happened, security around document storage has become much more stringent. This might be the only original copy." After thanking Janet and wishing her well in her new position, I drove directly to Diane's office. The envelope, secure in my bag. If the prenuptial agreement had indeed been tampered with, it would represent yet another layer of deception in Tom's elaborate betrayal. But it would also provide further legal leverage, ensuring that his attempts to limit my financial recovery through fraudulent means would ultimately fail. The car he bought his mistress was just the beginning of what I would reclaim from the wreckage of our marriage. 1 year had passed since the day I discovered the credit card statement that changed everything. Tom was serving his 15-year sentence. Vanessa had completed her testimony and begun her own shorter prison term, and the firm had finally stabilized after implementing comprehensive compliance reforms. I stood in my new office, arranging framed credentials on the wall. The transition from school counselor to private practice had been challenging, but rewarding. My client list was growing steadily, primarily women navigating major life transitions, many of them emerging from relationships marked by financial or emotional deception. The Porsche had served its purpose, both practical and symbolic. I'd driven it for 3 months, reclaiming what had been taken from me, before selling it to fund the launch of my practice. The sleek, modern office space with its soothing colors and comfortable furnishings felt authentically mine in a way the sports car never had. The prenuptial agreement Janet had discovered proved crucial in the final divorce settlement. Tom's tampering with the document, substituting pages to limit my financial recovery, constituted fraud upon the court, resulting in the entire agreement being invalidated. The judge had awarded me the maximum possible share of legitimate marital assets, plus additional compensation for Tom's documented deception. My victim impact statement at his sentencing had focused not on vengeance but on transformation, acknowledging the pain of betrayal while emphasizing my journey toward renewal. Several journalists had approached afterward, resulting in interviews that led to speaking engagements and workshop opportunities. The experience that had nearly destroyed me had become the foundation for helping others rebuild. Lisa arrived, with lunch, interrupting my reminiscence. "Look at you, all professional in your fancy new office," she teased, setting down bags of our favorite Thai food. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life," I admitted, joining her at the small conference table. A year ago, I was in shock, discovering layer after layer of deception. Now I'm helping other women navigate similar journeys. "You turned poison into medicine," Lisa observed. "Not everyone could have done that." After lunch, I walked to Datostad, my car, a practical, fuel-efficient model I'd researched thoroughly before purchasing. No flashy status symbol, just reliable transportation chosen with clear eyes and complete agency. As I drove to my afternoon appointment, a workshop for a women's professional development organization, I reflected on how thoroughly my perspective had shifted. The pain of Tom's betrayal hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something constructive: wisdom, resilience, and a deeper capacity for empathy. The questions that had once consumed me, how could he do this? Was any of it real? What did I miss? Had gradually lost their urgency. What mattered now was what I was building, not what I had lost. The future I was creating, not the past I had survived. My new life wasn't defined by Tom's betrayal, or even my response to it, but by the authentic choices I made each day. And as I pulled into the parking lot, preparing to share my story with women who might benefit from my experience, I felt genuine gratitude for the journey, not despite its painful origins, but inclusive of them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.